In the unforgiving wilderness of the Yukon, where the brutal landscape challenges even the most experienced gold miners, legendary prospector Tony Beets found himself at a crossroads. His once thriving mining empire, built on years of relentless hard work and bold risks, was suddenly in jeopardy after a series of catastrophic setbacks. Facing the very real possibility of losing his grip on the Klondike's riches, Tony decided to take a gamble that would either secure his legacy or plunge his operation into chaos, a gamble on a rusted, forgotten piece of equipment buried deep in the Yukon wilderness. This is the story of how Tony Beets, known as the King of the Klondike, turned a rusty mobile trommel into a lifeline for his mining operation, pushing his crew to their limits in the process. $1 million loss. The burning of the Viking dredge. For years, Tony Beets relied on his massive Viking dredge to pull gold from the Klondike's rivers. The colossal machine had become a symbol of Tony's mining prowess, capable of extracting large amounts of gold from mountains of dirt and gravel. Unlike modern equipment, the dredge was a relic from the past, a towering, floating machine that Tony believed could still be the key to his success. However, disaster struck when the Viking dredge caught fire. The blaze wasn't just a mechanical failure, it was a financial nightmare. The fire caused extensive damage, leaving Tony with a difficult decision. Should he spend millions on repairs, or should he cut his losses and move on? The dredge, once the pride of his operation, was now a burned-out liability. With winter fast approaching, Tony knew he couldn't afford downtime. Every day without a functioning dredge meant lost gold and dwindling profits. Time was running out, and Tony needed a solution, fast. An unusual discovery: the abandoned trommel in Moose Creek. Desperate for a solution, Tony's crew embarked on a search for alternative equipment. Their efforts led them to an abandoned mobile trommel deep in the wilderness of Moose Creek. The machine, known as the TRL, Trommel Recovery Line, was a rusted relic weighing 35 tons. It had been built nearly 30 years ago by a lone prospector and was only used for one mining season before being left to rot. Unlike the stationary Viking dredge, the TRL was a mobile trommel that could be transported from site to site, making it a versatile tool for mining in the ever-changing Yukon landscape. Despite its dilapidated state, Tony saw potential in the machine. It wasn't just a backup, it could be the key to unlocking new mining opportunities. However, purchasing the TRL came with a hefty price tag. Tony agreed to pay over $400,000 for the abandoned machine, a significant risk for a piece of equipment that hadn't been operational in decades. But for Tony, taking risks had always been part of the game. The high-stakes mission: transporting the trommel out of the wilderness. Buying the TRL was only the beginning. The real challenge lay in transporting the massive trommel from Moose Creek to Tony's mining camp, a journey of over 100 miles through rugged terrain, dense forests, and icy rivers. The task required dismantling the trommel piece by piece to make it transportable. Tony entrusted his youngest son, Mike Beets, to lead the mission. The crew began by carefully disassembling the trommel, removing the conveyor belt, the sluice box, and the massive 20-ton drum. Each piece had to be loaded onto trucks, a task that proved nerve-wracking and dangerous. One of the most daunting obstacles was crossing a river using a ferry. The combined length of the truck and the trailer carrying the trommel exceeded 80 feet, far longer than the ferry could comfortably handle. If the ferry couldn't accommodate the load, the crew would have to take a 200-mile detour to the nearest bridge. Every mile of the journey was fraught with danger. The rough mountain roads caused equipment failures, and at one point, the truck carrying the trommel nearly tipped over, almost crushing one of the crew members. Despite the risks, the team pushed on, driven by the belief that this machine could change their fortunes. The clock is ticking, racing against winter's freeze. Back at camp, Tony and his crew faced another challenge. Winter was closing in fast. The Yukon's harsh winters freeze the ground solid, making mining nearly impossible. If they couldn't get the TRL up and running before the first snowfall, they risked losing an entire mining season. The crew worked tirelessly to rebuild the trommel. The machine had been exposed to the elements for decades, and years of rust had taken their toll. Tony brought in his best mechanics to inspect every bolt, joint, and gear. They replaced worn-out belts, rusted components, and upgraded critical parts to improve the trommel's efficiency. The work was slow and grueling. Long days turned into longer nights, filled with the sound of grinding metal and welding torches. The pressure was immense, but Tony knew that rushing the process could lead to costly mistakes. Every decision had to be precise. A moment of truth: the first test run of the Trommel. After weeks of relentless effort, the Trommel was finally ready for its first test run. The atmosphere in camp was tense as the crew gathered around to watch the machine come to life. The operator fired up the engine, and the massive drum began to turn slowly before picking up speed. The crew held their breath as the first load of dirt was fed into the Trommel. The machine roared to life, separating gold from the dirt and gravel. Moments later, the crew erupted into cheers. The Trommel worked. For Tony, this wasn't just a victory, it was a turning point. The TRL represented more than a piece of equipment. It symbolized resilience, determination, and the ability to adapt in an ever-changing industry. The machine's mobility and efficiency meant Tony could now mine in areas previously inaccessible with stationary dredges. Tony Beets' vision: building a golden legacy. With the TRL back in action, Tony set his sights on the future. He knew that mining in the Yukon required constant adaptation and innovation. The mobile trommel gave him the flexibility to mine in new areas, reducing downtime and increasing productivity. However, Tony's bold approach hasn't always been without controversy. His no-nonsense leadership style and risky decisions have made him a polarizing figure in the mining world. One infamous incident, where a crew member poured gasoline into a dredge pond and set it on fire, landed Tony in legal trouble. Despite the setbacks, Tony's focus has always remained on building a stable and profitable mining operation. As the season progressed, Tony continued to push his team to bring in more heavy equipment to support the TRL. Excavators and loaders kept the dirt moving steadily, transforming the camp into a well-oiled operation. Overcoming challenges. The Yukon is never predictable. Just as things seemed to stabilize, the Yukon's unpredictable nature struck again. The drum of the Trommel began making an alarming grinding noise. After hours of troubleshooting, the crew discovered that a faulty bearing had caused the drum to misalign, a costly issue in both time and money. With winter fast approaching, Tony made a tough call to airlift replacement parts via helicopter. The move was expensive but necessary. Once the parts arrived, the crew worked non-stop to get the Trommel running again. As the season drew to a close, Tony Beets reflected on the journey. The resurrection of the TRL wasn't just about finding gold, it was about proving that resilience and determination could overcome even the toughest challenges. The Yukon is a harsh and unpredictable place, but Tony Beets has shown time and time again that he's willing to take risks, face challenges head-on, and adapt to whatever the wilderness throws his way. For Tony, the TRL represents more than a machine, it's a symbol of his unwavering commitment to success. The king of the Klondike isn't giving up anytime soon. As the mining season progressed in the unforgiving Yukon, two of Gold Rush's biggest names, Tony Beets and Parker Schnabel, found themselves in a race against time and nature. Both men took huge risks to push their operations forward, but the challenges they faced would test their crew's limits and their own leadership. From Tony's battle to keep his Trommel running to Parker's ambitious move to claim Dominion Creek, this season has been a roller coaster of setbacks, perseverance, and gold fever. Tony Beets' massive Trommel, a risky bet that paid off. At Nugget Creek, Tony Beets and his team took on the monumental task of revamping their mining operation to support the colossal Trommel Recovery Line, TRL. The mobile Trommel was a key piece of equipment designed to handle vast amounts of dirt and gravel, extracting every possible ounce of gold. However, operating such a massive machine required constant maintenance and support. To keep the dirt moving steadily, Tony brought in additional excavators, loaders, and support equipment. The team transformed the site into a well-oiled machine, with every piece of equipment working in harmony to maximize efficiency. But for Tony, finding gold wasn't enough. He wanted to extract as much gold as possible, as quickly as possible. The Yukon summer is notoriously short, and every day mattered. The crew worked tirelessly, often going days without sleep to keep the Trommel running. It was grueling, back-breaking work, but their efforts began to pay off. The gold recovered covered their expenses and then some, giving Tony a much-needed return on his investment. However, the Yukon is unpredictable, and just when things seemed to be going smoothly, disaster struck. The heart of the Trommel, the massive drum, began making a loud grinding noise, forcing the crew to shut down operations immediately. Mechanics were brought in to inspect the issue, and after hours of troubleshooting, they discovered that a faulty bearing had caused the drum to misalign. The repair would be costly in both time and money. With winter fast approaching, every hour of downtime threatened the season's success. In a bold move, Tony decided to airlift replacement parts via helicopter, an expensive, high-risk solution, but a necessary one. The tension in the camp was palpable as the crew raced against time to fix the Trommel. After non-stop work, the machine roared back to life, and the operation resumed. As the season drew to a close, Tony reflected on the journey. The setbacks, mechanical failures, and relentless pace had tested the team's resilience, but they persevered. The experience gained this season would serve them well for future endeavors. For Tony Beets, every risk is a calculated gamble, and his determination to keep mining, no matter the odds, keeps him a legendary figure in the Klondike. Parker Schnabel's gamble on Dominion Creek, a make-or-break move. While Tony fought to keep his Trommel operational, Parker Schnabel was making big moves of his own. The young miner took a huge risk by purchasing the Dominion Creek claim, a high-stakes gamble that required millions of dollars in investment. Parker's goal was to establish a long-term mining operation that could yield massive payoffs. But the pressure to see a quick return on his investment was immense. The crew focused on a new cut they dubbed the Money Pit. The plan was straightforward: dig trenches, haul gold-bearing dirt to the wash plant, and process it as fast as possible. However, the season got off to a rocky start. Parker had hoped to recoup some of his expenses by selling surplus equipment, but those efforts fell short, leaving his finances stretched thin. Determined to turn things around, Parker tasked Mitch with hauling dirt from the ditches to the wash plant. After 2 grueling days of setup, the wash plant was finally operational. The crew anxiously awaited the first gold haul, but just as things seemed to be on track, disaster struck again. The pump feeding the wash plant lost water pressure, causing the entire system to shut down. Without water, the wash plant couldn't process the dirt, and without processed dirt, there was no gold. After investigating the issue, the mechanics discovered a fractured intake hose that had created an airlock in the system. Liam, one of Parker's mechanics, applied a temporary fix using silicone. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it worked, and the plant was back online. Despite the setbacks, Parker pushed his crew through 2 weigh-ins. The final gold from the Unforgiven cut and the first batch from Dominion Creek yielded promising results. Dominion Creek was producing around 1.3 ounces of gold per hour. It wasn't enough to meet Parker's ambitious season goals, but it was a start. Final thoughts: 2 miners, 2 legacies. For Tony Beets and Parker Schnabel, the Yukon remains a land of opportunity and risk. Tony's perseverance and willingness to gamble on massive, old-school machines continue to pay off. His experience and resilience have made him a mining legend. Parker, on the other hand, represents the future of mining in the Klondike. His willingness to explore new opportunities, whether in the Yukon or abroad, shows his ambition to build a long-term legacy. However, Parker's high-stakes moves come with big risks, and the pressure to deliver results is relentless. As winter closes in on the Yukon, both men face uncertain futures. Will Tony's Trommel keep churning out gold? Will Parker's Dominion Creek gamble pay off? One thing is certain: the Yukon will always demand grit, determination, and a relentless drive to succeed. For Tony Beets and Parker Schnabel, the gold may be buried deep, but their passion for mining keeps them digging.